On December 31st, 2009, the Christian Research Journal, led by Hank Hanegraaff, released the results of their multi-year-long research into the local church's movement of Witness Lee. This came decades after the journal, under the leadership of Walter Martin, had called the church out as being cultic or aberrant and called on believers to mark and avoid them. In my experience, the aftermath of the release of We Were Wrong from inside the Lord's Recovery was a sort of quiet jubilance. While I don't remember anything more than a rousing amen upon its announcement at a Lord's Table meeting, I do know that surely thousands of copies have been purchased by local church members for personal and evangelistic purposes. For me, however, this journal had the opposite effect. Instead of excitement, I was confronted with the question, do people think my church is a cult? In the case of Christian cults, we are often referring to heretical teachings on the Trinity, exaltation of humanity to godhood, and a restoration of the one true church mentality. It is almost certainly the case that all of these things are present in Mormonism, which most Christians would call a cult that broke off from or was never really part of Christianity. On the surface, it may seem easy to throw the Lord's Recovery into this basket. And, as we will see in Part 2, many Christian scholars tried to do that very thing. While I wouldn't discount their conclusions, I wouldn't entirely agree with them either. While Lee might have not knowingly taught heresy, his teaching, far from being clear, would have made it possible for the average layperson to unknowingly accept heresy. The main problem, as was mentioned in We Were Wrong, lies in the fact that Witness Lee had a penchant for making controversial statements without immediately offering qualifications. Basically, Lee would say things that sounded like, or may have been heretical, but would say things in another meeting on the same topic that were entirely orthodox. In one message, he's calling those in the recovery baby gods. Then, in another, he is using the qualification in life and nature, but not in the Godhead. For this reason, without being able to discern the mind of a man who's been dead for almost 30 years, I am much more comfortable using the term aberrant for the theology in the Lord's Recovery. There is a lesser form of cult, however, that I think could apply to the Lord's Recovery, especially as it exists today, that being a cult of personality. These types of cults can be malignant or benign and simply involve unwavering commitment to the person and/or teachings of a single leader or line of leaders. The teaching of minister/ministry of the age, which we will highlight later in this series, in my opinion, aligns perfectly with this definition. While the teaching of the ministry of the age, in terms of fealty to one ministry, is mostly benign, it is utterly unheard of in historic Christianity and historic Protestantism. The Lutherans, for example, though named after Martin Luther, do not require fealty to only the ministry and teachings of Luther. In fact, theologians like Martin Chemnitz, Johann Gerhard, and Philip Melanchthon, some of whom were contemporaries of Luther, are just a few of the many whose theology carries weight in Lutheranism. Now, I can't read Lee's mind, and with no evidence I can think of, cannot expressly say he was seeking some sort of exclusive, papal-esque power. More likely than not, he was a very charismatic leader who truly believed that the new things he taught were revelations in the Bible revealed to him by God. Those who followed him believed the same of Lee and have held up his teachings as the ministry of the age. Even though Witness Lee has been dead since 1997, nothing other than his teachings and conference materials have been used in nearly every aspect of the religious life of a local church member today. Larger churches even have a book room where you can exclusively buy Witness Lee and Watchman Nee books. Every conference outline is taken from a book or group of messages spoken by Witness Lee. Every week or multi-week long training topic comes from the same place. Even the morning devotional book, The Holy Word for Morning Revival, used daily and quoted by members every Lord's Day morning, comes from the most recent conference or training spoken by the current leadership and drawn from Witness Lee's teachings. The material taught in children's meeting comes from Witness Lee, as does anything used by the Christian students' clubs on college campuses. The Bible used is the recovery version, which includes some edits favorable to Witness Lee's theology, though not outright unfaithful to the original text, as well as just as many, if not more, footnotes by Witness Lee than the Bible verses themselves. At most conferences and trainings, you will constantly hear the speakers say things like, "Brother Lee says," or "the ministry says," or "who else could teach these things?" Among the average local church members, Witness Lee could do no wrong, and if you had any questions about the history of the group or Witness Lee, you were told not to Google it because there's so much poison out there that would draw you away from the recovery. I'm sure I'm missing some other aspects that you can feel free to leave in the comments below. But it is clear that there's a certain level of exaltation of the ministry of Witness Lee, and to a lesser extent Watchman Nee, that rises to the level of a cult of personality. Now, with all this in mind, this will be the last time you hear me attach the word cult to the Lord's recovery. While I do believe it could be called a cult of personality, I have found that the use of the word cult does more harm than good when talking to current or questioning members. There is so much baggage attached to the word that it just causes people to become defensive and put their walls up. It also doesn't take proving the church to be a cult or even aberrant to nullify their claims. All it takes is to show them as a sect or denomination. This doesn't mean that they don't teach unusual or harmful doctrines. Much of what I'll be talking about on this channel are those doctrines. It just means that these exclusive claims hold no more weight than any other denomination's claims. In the next part of this series, we will begin looking into the letter that restarted the cult controversy, CRI's response in the form of "We were wrong," and how both of these missed the mark.